Off the Hook, airing on offthehooksports.com. Your home for real news, real opinions, and what really matters about Tennessee athletics. The Off the Hook podcast at offthehooksports.com or Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, or wherever you go for your favorite podcasts. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, TuneIn, iHeart. Like, share, follow, subscribe. Off the Hook with Dave Hooker starts now.
Welcome to you and you. Excuse me, pardon me, dealing with a bit of a raspy voice. My wife says I talk too much. So you can help me. Get involved. Get your thoughts on Tennessee Akron. Amanda LaFrada enjoying a very well-deserved vacation, and we hope that she absolutely enjoys the beach and the sun. She'll be back with us on Monday. And coming up on the program, we've got the one, the only Chris Landry, the coach, and we're going to break down a little bit of Hendon Hooker. We're also going to take your questions about maybe some other teams, some thoughts you have about the SEC, but we'll also focus on Tennessee, of course, as we always do. And also, we're looking forward to a visit with Josh Ward, in which we'll discuss the biggest concerns. So this just in. The Akron game is not going to tell you a lot about Tennessee's football program. We're not going to walk away with answers as to is Tennessee's offensive line significantly better than they were, especially early against Pitt. Is Tennessee's defensive backs better? We're not going to know if Hendon Hooker is a more accurate quarterback because his feet are going to be set. And that's something we're going to get into with Chris Landry. So we get you caught up to date. And if you haven't heard, the Southeastern Conference directed the University of Georgia and the University of Tennessee to postpone scheduled football games versus Oklahoma because the transition of Oklahoma into the SEC will not allow for the involved institutions to fulfill their respective contractual non-conference home and home appearance obligations. So the second non-conference games are the issues in the home and home series. So those will be postponed. A couple of other things on offthehooksports.com before I get to some of my thoughts about Hendon Hooker, and some of them you might not agree with, but there are a couple of things I want to dive into that. So first, so on page the Down and Dirty at 30 took the podium. Down and Dirty at 30 brought to you by Honeybee Coffee. Honeybee Coffee right there in Knoxville, several locations, but you can also order online. It's the top 5% of the beans in the world. But the bottom line is it just tastes great. I don't drink coffee. When I go there, I drink 3 cups. It's just that good. So go ahead and order it online. You can go to Honeybee Coffee. Just Google that, or you can go to offthehooksports.com and you'll see the ads, and you can have the best coffee going. It's not even close to being off the Bucks. So Down and Dirty at 30. So they are going to postpone, as I mentioned, the Oklahoma game for both Georgia and Tennessee. But great piece by, I like Jimmy Himes on Salon Page. Jimmy with the Sports Animal. For those of you that are a little too young, may not think of him as a writer. You think of him as a talk show host, but he happens to be incredible at both. So he had a column that I thought pretty much hit the nail on the head when it comes to trying to control the narrative and what people think about your program. So on page a third, comes out to the podium and says on Tuesday that, quote, "We play defense here too." I mean, like, you got to play defense to win a game. Just trying to make it seem like we only play offense here. The defense, we put that on our back. We try to make an impact felt. Yes, you do try to make an impact felt. But if you look at statistically what Tennessee has done in the Josh Heupel regime, there's no way that you can say Tennessee is a respectable even defense at this point. I love what they did against Pitt. I love how they turned in big plays, but that is essentially what this defense is. Do not expect it to be that shutdown defense because it's just not going to be. And what do you expect of Tennessee's defense will be today's tough question. Great, good, okay, or the same. We'll post that here momentarily. And again, we have got John Adams coming up here momentarily that we'll get to, and we'll get his thoughts on what Tennessee can accomplish versus Akron and the fact that they actually could be in the Sugar Bowl. So, as far as Hendon Hooker, let's ultimately take a look at Hendon Hooker without the stats. Because if anybody posts on the message board about his completion percentage, then you're off base. Josh Heupel is such a good offensive coach, such a good coordinator, such a fantastic play caller, and runs with tempo that guys are running bare and they're running wide open. That is what is happening in this offense. So being accurate is more about hitting guys in stride, not having to reach back. Being accurate is about not flying balls. Now, that has happened more times than I can count, and I'm sure you've been frustrated at home and you've said to yourself, hey, what's going on? Why is he missing that guy? He's wide open. Well, a couple of things. You heard Josh Heupel refer to it earlier this week. I believe it was on the SEC teleconference. It is on offthehooksports.com. And Josh Heupel said, we worked with his footwork a little bit. Then the quote transitioned to, it was a great opportunity to get better off what was a win, and reminded everybody that it was a win and not a loss against Pitt. That's what Josh Heupel is supposed to say. But ultimately, the footwork issue comes down to what's happening up front. And is Hendon Hooker comfortable? So think of the opposite end of the spectrum when you have an Aaron Rodgers, for instance, who can throw the ball with both feet over his head. I mean, he can throw it from anywhere. That's not Hendon Hooker. So what I would encourage you to do on Saturday is watch Hendon Hooker's feet. Are they set? Is that front toe pointed where the ball is supposed to go? Is he resetting his feet, which they don't do nearly as much now under Heupel as they've done previously under other coaches? Keep an eye on that if you're looking for something to watch in the Akron game, because Akron is absolutely horrible. This is not going to be a football game. Go enjoy it. For those of you who like to indulge, knock it out, because you can forget this game because it's nothing incredibly awesome. And I'll go ahead and tell you the thing to watch the protection, watch Hooker's feet. I'm not saying they're going to be great against Florida, but if there's any issue whatsoever, then you have to question what the offseason was all about. I don't think that's going to be the case. I want to be really clear. Do not think that's going to be the case. I think everything is going to be fine with Hendon Hooker and the offensive line. But ultimately, Tennessee is going to play Florida. And you go into that game and this season with 4 returning starters on the offensive line. So you look at that, and if y'all remember the old Phil Steele magazines that you would flip through it and have all the returning starters, well, you would naturally think that 4 out of 5, even though Cade Mays was one of the ones that left and he got drafted in the NFL, you would think that there's going to be an upgrade there also from the fact they've had a full year under Josh Heupel. But we have seen a little glimpse that might not be the case. I think Tennessee's offensive line dealt with a lot against Pitt. I think that they will ultimately be just fine, and I think they'll have a good pocket for Hooker. So we'll go to some comments. Crazy just tuning in. Dave, no Amanda today. No, Amanda's on vacation. Well-deserved, and we certainly appreciate you asking that. Amanda is enjoying the beach, and she should. John said Burrell did play a lot better against Pitt. I do agree with that, John, but I will say this too, that I don't know that they have a number 1 corner at the end of the day. I don't know that they have an Alontae Taylor. Now, Orange Blood brings up a great question. Looking forward to seeing some squirrel on the field Saturday. I don't know where that guy is, but Orange Blood, you've tipped me off. I'm going to ask. I'm going to find out and where his progression is, because he hasn't had the impact that I thought he might be able to. John said Hooker's completion percentage is close to what his season percentage was last year. It's true, John. But I would say this. It's not about completion percentage. I'm not sure if you tuned in at the very beginning. Guys are running wide open a lot of the times. And I think completion percentage is way too easy of a fallback. And if you are ultimately falling back on that, I think that you're not given a true indication of the accuracy issues. So I think there are still some accuracy issues. Again, big win against Pitt. I don't want to sound like a Debbie Downer whatsoever. And if you ask me to pick right now, I think that Tennessee beats Florida. I know a lot of you are saying that, hey, I'll believe it when I see it. And I don't blame you whatsoever, because it seems like about every other year that Tennessee should beat Florida, and they don't. And it seems like that going all the way back to, oh, goodness gracious, the early 90s. So John said, meaning that we shouldn't panic because of his completion percentage. Again, John, I think there are bigger plays to be had. Oh, crazy calling me Davy Downer. It's not what I'm trying to be. I'm trying to look at a game that essentially is a mini scrimmage, if that makes sense. So it's an opportunity to get a lot better. And the other thing that we're going to talk to Chris Landry about, hey, there just cannot be any more issues in special teams. Not a fumbled punt return, not a blocked punt. Obviously, that needs to be solid. So you want to see execution across the board. So crazy, I'm not Debbie Downer. John Adams, how about John right after this, as you are listening to Off the Hook Sports. And we've got Chris Landry coming up, got a big breakdown. We're going to be really involved with taking your questions about the Vols, and also, we're going to take your questions about more than just that. If you want to branch off and ask some other SEC questions, Chris will give you that input. So how about that? We will be back in 2 minutes. Hang with us. Tell us about Big Orange Phillies, Mr. Viles.
Gary Viles here. I want to personally invite you to North Knoxville's newest sports bar and restaurant. It's Big Orange Phillies, located in Black Oak Center. And yes, folks, it's happening in Halls. Big Orange Phillies offers family-friendly environment with homemade meals and the best deli-style subs around. Billiards, darts, jukebox, shuffleboard, and cornhole, and a full bar. We also offer valet parking on weekends and during special events. We even have a covered back patio. It's happening at Big Orange Phillies. We want, we need, and we appreciate your business.
Hi, Mike Davis here with City Heating and Air, reminding you to always dare to compare. Our team provides quality local heating and air service, installation, and maintenance across East Tennessee. We use only the best equipment like American Standard heating and air conditioning for your residential, new construction, or commercial needs. Honesty, dependability, and customer satisfaction have been the cornerstones of our business since 1961. City Heat and Air.
Dare to compare.
This is Al's Nest Barbecue Supply, so come on in and see all the different rubs and sauces we have, plus a complete line of Green Mountain grills. Don't be overwhelmed. We have plenty of help so you can produce the best barbecue and amaze your family and friends. Barbecue is America's food, and we'll do what we can to bring you all the best products. We're Al's Nest Barbecue, where Chattanooga goes to grill.
Do you want to own the more that owns every job? Then get to Vassey Lawn and Garden in Cleveland and get you a Toro. I'm David Vassey, here to talk to you about Toro. With a Toro Zero Turn, you'll get more out of every minute and you'll reach the finish line faster. At Vassey's, we like to say, no matter if you're mowing 3 acres a week or 11 lawns a day, homeowners and business owners alike find confidence in equipment they can trust from top to bottom.
Vassey Lawn and Garden, Highway 60 North in Cleveland.
Man alive, it's worth the drive.
It's Gary Viles here, Viles Automotive on Callahan Drive. I've been selling cars here in East Tennessee for 27 years. In that time, I've come to realize it's not about the car. It's about you, the customer. So I'm here to take care of you just like family. Good credit, bad credit, you name it, we can get you taken care of. If we don't have it, we can find it for you. We go across the country to get any vehicle that you want. And here at Viles Automotive, we don't believe in fake numbers. We just give you great deals. And as always, we want, we need, and we appreciate your business.
Do you want to own the more that owns every job? Then get to Vassey Lawn and Garden in Cleveland and get you a Toro. I'm David Vassey, here to talk to you about Toro. With a Toro Zero Turn, you'll get more out of every minute and you'll reach the finish line faster. At Bassey's, we like to say, no matter if you're mowing 3 acres a week or 11 lawns a day, homeowners and business owners alike find confidence in equipment they can trust from top to bottom.
Vassey Lawn and Garden, Highway 60 North in Cleveland.
Man alive, it's worth the drive.
Off the Hook, airing on offthehooksports.com, your home for real news, real opinions, and what really matters about Tennessee athletics. The Off the Hook podcast at offthehooksports.com or Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, or wherever you go for your favorite podcasts. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, TuneIn, iHeart. Like, share, follow, subscribe. Off the Hook with Dave Hooker starts now.
And look at this guy. He's John Adams of the Knoxville News Sentinel. You can follow his work everywhere. Smash that like and subscribe button so we can be a part of your sports coverage, both Tennessee and SEC. So John's appearance and the Vol Report brought to you by Vols Automotive Group, Integrity on Callahan Drive, and Big Orange Phillies. A great family environment that you can watch sports in. What's better than that on Maynardville Pike? Again, hit that subscribe and like button and let us be a part of your sports coverage. John, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well, Dave. And yourself?
Never better. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look back at that Pitt game really quickly before I get to Sugar Bowl talk, which, boy, wouldn't that be huge for Tennessee if they were able to make it to the Sugar Bowl. But the Pitt game, we're too early in the season to truly know what that win means. Your take on what Tennessee did in an overtime victory against Pitt?
I like what its defense did, because thing about Tennessee's defense, it goes into game with basically no expectations. It's the it's the sidekick to the offense. It's an afterthought. If the guys run out on the field, the defensive players run out on the field, nobody falls down. Tennessee fans think, hey, this could be a good Saturday for us. But they really made some plays against Pittsburgh, the biggest of which was knocking Kadon Slovis out of the game at the end of the first half. So Pittsburgh is left to play with a backup quarterback who's limping severely. Not your ideal path to victory, but yeah, I just thought that was crucial. They came up with an interception. Trayvon Flowers did. Turning point of the game with Pitt down 10, with Pitt leading 10-0 and about to score again, seemingly, and he pulls off the interception. So I think Tennessee fans are in general pleased with the defense. Offense, not as good as it's maybe expected to be. However, Pitt has a really good front seven, and I think it will cause problems for a lot of offenses if it can stay healthy. So that was, it was one of those games, and I think most people looked at it this way, that Tennessee is so often lost during the dark ages of all football.
Yep.
And it won this time.
True. Is Tennessee playing with fire with this defense? I tend to think so. You won't be playing with fire at Vols Automotive Group. Vols Automotive Group on Callahan Drive is all about integrity, and they have an incredible car selection there. And they also have a great service department. They want, they need, they appreciate your business. Check out Vols Automotive Group. So, John, I think Tennessee's defense is this: a defense with limitations on its roster, a defense that can make big plays, but not a defense that's going to be consistently great. I don't think that changes. That, to me, is playing with fire, because you're going to have to turn in 3, 4, 5 game-changing type of plays to consider it a good defensive day. It's partly what college football has become to some extent, but with Tennessee, I think it's even more significant that they come up with those 3, 4, 5 big plays.
I think you hit the nail on the head, Dave. Alabama and Georgia are off the table. Again, unless something really bizarre transpires between now and when those games are played. But you just don't expect Tennessee to compete well against those teams, nor do you expect anybody else in the SEC to. Maybe Arkansas against Alabama. But when you look at the rest of the schedule, And you talk about, the defense isn't exactly going to stonewall anybody. It could be good enough, coupled with a strong offense, to win the rest of those games. LSU's not as good as I thought it would be. South Carolina's not as good as I thought it would be. Missouri and Vanderbilt are horrible. Kentucky's probably maybe a little better than I thought. But how many times does Kentucky ever win in Neyland Stadium? So you can see how this thing is kind of setting up for the Vols and why there's this optimism about it. I think the optimism is not far-fetched. I think it's very real.
Okay, well, let me see if that optimism can take them all the way to New Orleans, because somebody believes that they could be in the Sugar Bowl. Big Orange Phillies right there on Maynardville Pike, family-friendly darts, billiards, and everything that you could possibly imagine in terms of a great place to watch ball on the weekend. So I would highly suggest that you go there. Again, I want to point out it is a family environment. So, John, Jerry Palm, who would admittedly say this is way early, has Tennessee in the Sugar Bowl in his bowl projections. I've worked not with, but alongside, had him as a guest several times. And I don't even think Jerry Palm likes doing bowl predictions in September, to be honest with you. But it is a talking point. Can you imagine if Tennessee was in the Sugar Bowl? I mean, short of making the college football playoff, I can't think of a better scenario.
No, and I think when you look at it and think, is this realistic? Look at Ole Miss, where Ole Miss was when Lane Kiffin went there. Mediocre first team, has a good year, comes back with a really good year, gets a lot of transfers, has a good year, improves the defense, and lo and behold, Ole Miss is in the Sugar Bowl. So it's conceivable. It's not, it's not out of the question. I think Arkansas is a better team right now. I would put, if I were doing power rankings, I'd have Tennessee fourth, but Arkansas will not survive that schedule. I think Tennessee will have a better overall record. And that's what when you start looking at bowls, it's not just about your conference record, conference standings. It's about overall, what's your overall record? In Arkansas, it's got to go to BYU in the middle of the year. I don't know who figured out that was a good idea. It wasn't a football coach, I know that. But so I think Tennessee's chances are very realistic.
Yeah, and I don't know who scheduled that. Somebody scheduled App State at Texas A&M, and wowzers. What kind of, I mean, if you look at it's, I think roughly $95 million that they would have to pay Jimbo Fisher to fire him. And we're not talking about his first or second year, John. That you should have your program established and shouldn't get beat by Appy State. I mean, I can get that in rebuilding mode, but how long's he been there at Texas A&M?
Some A&M fans would say too long. The program is pretty much record-wise about the same as it was when Kevin Sumlin was there. He was fired, and Jimbo recently had his contract extension, so he pretty much will be paid millions and millions of dollars until the world ends. So here's what I've always kind of been a Jimbo Fisher bandwagon guy, but one thing I'm really good at, there aren't many of them, but I can jump off bandwagons really fast. I mean, somebody will look at me and say, God, that guy's walking slow. But watch me jump off a bandwagon and say, geez, I didn't see that coming. But I have that capability, and I'm off his now, and that's not a good sign for him. When I look at Jimbo, when he was at Florida State, won a national championship, had Jameis Winston as his quarterback, that's another story. But he was known as an offensive guru. That term's thrown around a little bit too much, probably. And a quarterback whisperer, another term that's thrown around frequently. But his resume backs that up. When you look at the breadth of his work, look at him now. It's as though the offensive parade has passed him by. I mean, when has he had a really good quarterback? At Texas A&M, Kellen Mond was his best quarterback. And Kellen Mond's played for the Minnesota Vikings. Not a lot. He's a backup. I thought he was an okay college quarterback. I was actually surprised he stuck with an NFL team. But anyway, he wasn't Johnny Manziel. He wasn't that could be a good thing in some ways. But my point is that Jimbo hasn't really developed a Bryce Young or a Mac Jones or any of these upper level, top flight SEC quarterbacks that you thought he would. And when you look at what he does offensively, it just doesn't keep up with what's going on elsewhere. When you look at what Tennessee's doing, what Ole Miss is doing, not just Alabama and Georgia, super talented teams. And so I just wonder I think he needs to change his whole offensive approach and maybe bring in somebody like Oklahoma did, Jeff Lebby, who was at Ole Miss as an offensive coordinator.
Let me see if I can string this whole thing together. I was on the Dan Mullen bandwagon.
Uh-huh.
I jumped off that puppy about October last year.
Yes.
I thought there were 3 lock hires in my career, and that was Nick Saban to Alabama. That was Urban Meyer to Florida. So I was right there. And Dan Mullen to Florida. Those were my 3. Missed on that one pretty bad. The crazy part that Tennessee fans may not realize is I was told by somebody within Tennessee's athletic department, they thought they had Dan Mullen before Florida called. And that was pretty much a done deal. Can you imagine how different things would be had they hired Dan Mullen? I will say, first of all, it wouldn't be nearly as exciting. I don't think they would be as successful. I don't think he would recruit at a high level because it was a developmental program he ran at Mississippi State. Talk about dodging a bullet. The coaching fortunes over history have not gone Tennessee's way in the past 15 or so years. But, man, they really broke that way for the Vols because Tennessee's way better off with Josh Heupel.
I think it is, too, because of recruiting. However, look at it another way. First of all, if you hire Dan Mullen, you don't hire Jeremy Pruitt. You're not going on NCAA probation. You're not going 3-7 with Dan Mullen coaching your team. I mean, the guy's a brilliant offensive coach. He can put together some really awesome game plans against really good teams. He's developed quarterbacks. Recruiting is what failed him at Florida. But at Tennessee now, in an NIL era, if you've got a really aggressive NIL, and I think Tennessee has that Inspire. Remember, Josh Heupel's not regarded as a big-time recruiter either, and Tennessee's recruiting pretty well. I think it would have done okay recruiting under Dan Mullen, so I don't see it dodging a bullet. But I like what's going on now, so I wouldn't want to go back. But if you eliminate the Jeremy Pruitt era, that looks pretty good for your school. I mean, let's face it. And I'm with you on those. You look at surefire hires. I mean, if you hire Nick Saban or Urban Meyer, you're going to win a bunch of games. It doesn't matter where they go. But then after that, I'm not sure there are that many sure things out there. But and maybe one day we'll look back and say Billy Napier was what a great hire that was. But I really think if I were Tennessee and I'm getting ready to play Florida in about 10 days, I'm kind of glad Dan Mullen's not there. Because Tennessee didn't come close to beating him.
Well, interesting because at SEC Media Days, not just the Florida people that covered Florida, but across the board, Billy Napier detailed the guy. He's incredible. And I know you weren't at that, but it was just one after another. So you're not as high on Billy Napier as the rest of the media?
Well, I don't know how high they are on him. I just know he won at Louisiana and Lafayette. He won a lot of close games. He's a detail-oriented guy. who looks at every aspect of a football program, and including how far you have to walk from the practice field to your lockers. Get on the bus, guys. That's too far. Your legs are too valuable to be walking that far. He may be brilliant, or maybe he's Butch Jones. So I'm just not sold on. Yeah, ouch. I'm not sold on him yet, Dave. I mean, I've heard really good things about him, from people who covered him at Louisiana. So I think he can recruit well. So that may be all it takes. But if I'm putting together an offensive game plan for Tennessee or Alabama or against those teams rather, or Georgia, I'd get Dan Mullen out of that studio, and say, hey, coach, could you draw up about 20 plays that I could open the game with? I mean, Billy Napier, how good did his offense look against Kentucky?
Not grand. Not grand. He's John Adams of the Knoxville News Sentinel. John, where all can we follow your work? I do want to ask you who you would pick, and we'll get to that if Tennessee, Florida was this weekend. I feel pretty certain you would pick Tennessee over Akron, but where all can we follow your work, sir?
Well, don't assume anything, Dave. I think you're leaning in the right direction. You can follow me at the Knoxville News Sentinel, at knoxnews.com. Also on knoxnews.com, you can hear our SEC podcast, Blake Topmeyer and myself, where we'll give you each week locks of the week. So if you're a betting man, call up and make yourself some money.
Yeah, there you go. I'm not a betting man, and I'm not going to take your picks.
Don't blame me.
I'm terrible at picking games, but I'm every bit as good as you. Vols Automotive Group has the integrity that bookies usually don't. Vols Automotive Group has an incredible selection of cars and also has just an unbelievable service department, and you'll be treated fairly. And then really this weekend, make plans to go to Big Orange Phillies. Big Orange Phillies is a great place in North Knoxville and Maynardville Pike to hang out, watch some ball, and you will have a good time. So lastly, John, the future for Tennessee to me is incredibly bright. And let's take the 2022 season out of it. Other than, which is a big other than, Georgia, you could make an argument based off the Texas game. Alabama is on the decline, and at some point, Nick Saban is going to retire. He's not going to be there as long as Josh Heupel, surely to goodness. And as far as the other schools in the SEC, I think Tennessee's pretty close to being there. So if you say other than Georgia, I think things are shaping up nicely in the next 2, 3, 4 years for Tennessee. Way protected.
Dave, I don't agree with you on Saban. I'm not shoving him out the door. I think the guy, he's in pretty good health. He has nothing else he wants to do but coach. I don't think he's going anywhere. He could be there another 6 or 7 years. So I still see Alabama and Georgia as the roadblocks. Now, if Josh Heupel and Spire Collective can recruit well enough, they can get up there. But I don't think they can count on either one of those programs dropping back. They got to go get them. However, the rest of the league, who knows? Jimbo's faltering. I like what Lane Kiffin has done at Ole Miss. I think Brian Kelly can win at LSU. So it's kind of hard to say, but the main thing Tennessee has to do is just keep climbing. It's done a really good job of that so far under Josh Heupel.
Yep. He's John Adams. I'm Dave Hooker. The Vol Report brought to you by Vols Automotive Group and Big Orange Phillies, a production of Off the Hook Sports.
To own the more that owns every job, then get to Vassey Lawn and Garden in Cleveland and get you a Toro. I'm David Vassey, here to talk to you about Toro. With a Toro Zero Turn, you'll get more out of every minute and you'll reach the finish line faster. At Vassey's, we like to say, no matter if you're mowing 3 acres a week or 11 lawns a day, homeowners and business owners alike find confidence in equipment they can trust from top to bottom.
Vassey Lawn and Garden, Highway 60 North in Cleveland.
Man alive, it's worth the drive.
And it is this guy, Chris Landry of LandryFootball.com. Chris, it helps when I have my microphone on. I learned that just now.
Yeah, it does. I can hear you a little bit better. I don't have that strain.
I just out of 25 years in broadcasting, I just had the best intro ever, and we missed it because I had the microphone off.
We missed it. That happens that way sometimes.
Yeah. There goes that award. Thanks for pitch hitting for Amanda, who's enjoying vacation, for those that are curious. So here's what I want to do with Chris. I want to get you guys lined up. We've already got some questions about the Vols, but if you want to branch off into other SEC teams, I want to lean on him. I think a lot of Chris, I think that's apparent by the work we do together and the website and the insight that he gives you. Am I a bit of an X's and O's guy more than most? Perhaps, but I think he can give you a lot of insight in non-coach speak that you can understand. So if you have any questions about any Vols, we want to hear them now. I'm going to start with what you may be hearing. And this just in, Chris provides a lot of insight to coaches. So he knows people at pretty much every staff. So have you heard anything about Squirrel White? Because he was kind of the talk of camp, and it looked like he was the versatile type of player that you could find 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 plays for. And we haven't seen much out of him to this point. Thoughts?
Not surprising that we haven't. I think as talented as a guy like that is, it is often difficult to find that role. I mean, it's to me, what makes him valuable is his versatility, but what makes it difficult is to find him the right niche to where he can have the type of impact in the offense. But here's the thing, there's a little coaching tip is coaches tend to do this, a lot of them. And it's about, well, he doesn't know how to do this. He doesn't know how to do that. What you have to do with a guy like Squirrel White is say, look, we're going to use him in this way. And whatever that is, whatever he's most comfortable with, get him on the field, get him the ball. And you don't need to teach him the whole thing. Just find a couple of things he can do well. And then when he does that, then you can build upon that. That is something that I learned from Bill Belichick coaching. And like, I give you an example. I can remember doing some work. Nick Saban's at LSU, and they got a player, kind of similar type guy, Skylar Green. And Jimbo's the offensive coordinator, and he says, he can't do this, coach. He said, Jimbo, get the freaking guy the ball, teach him one or two things, and he became a big factor in that championship run that they had at LSU. Sometimes you can overcomplicate things a little bit, and if you wait till he knows everything, then it may be the entire season. So I think that it's a combination of that. I also think that it's early in the season. You got Brew McCoy, and you're getting him. I mean, I think there's a lot of things, a lot of mouths to feed in that offense, but I'm getting him on the field. But let me just say this. I don't know. Is he not doing a good job in practice? Is he not? Do they don't trust him catching the ball? I mean, those are the type of things I can't answer because I'm not there at practice every day. But assuming that's not the case, I think you need to get him. You need to get him on. You need to get him on a field, and I think you need to limit what you ask him to do, but let him make some plays for you and make defenses before you get in the SEC. Start to think about, we got to cover that guy, and you rent space in defensive coordinators' minds when you do that. And I think that makes you much more effective. See, everybody says, you need to hide that and do that. No. You need to show that. You need to make them prepare for that. You need them to take practice time away from preparing for something, and then maybe you don't use it and you do something else. There's the playbooks. The playbook is plenty thick to use a lot of things.
Your questions about Tennessee football, if you want to veer off and go other SEC teams, feel free and shoot it out there. Orange Blood said, I was talking about Hendon Hooker's feet earlier, and Orange Blood said Hendon's feet may not be pointed toward his receivers, but his head surely is. He stares at his target. The offense is designed for the first read to be open quickly, but good defense will exploit that. As far as I've really no disagreement with that. I completely think that his head does not look off safeties. I noticed that on Saturday. Am I wrong there?
No, it is absolutely, as I've explained before, it's part of what makes it a quarterback-friendly offense. It's a lot like what Lane Kiffin does. He schemes guys open, and it is a first read system. It doesn't require you to do that, which is why when I've talked about Hendon and people ask how effective he's going to be as a college player, he absolutely can be successful because of how they run this offense. So yeah, no, I think that's absolutely true. And his mechanics are not all that good, but again, you don't have to be as precise because they create more spacing by the way they design this offense and the tempo in which they run it.
Agreed. We'll field some more questions from you. The thoughts on Tennessee's safety. Someone saying that safeties will be key, especially against Bama and Georgia. Chris, how do you evaluate as a coach the safeties when I think there are coverage issues at the linebacker position? I think, as you pointed out, there's not an Alontae Taylor out there yet running around. I mean, how do you evaluate the safeties when there are a lot of issues in that back seven?
Well, the safeties positions has changed really over the years, and really how they evaluate, particularly in this system, but really in any way, is you've got to. It's tougher. Guys are a little lighter because they've got to cover better. Gone are the days where you have the safeties that are basically size of linebackers today. You've got to be able to cover. And you may not be, a great main cover guy where you can't cover the outside receiver, but you got to be able to cover a back. You got to be able to cover a tight end, and quite frankly, need to cover a big slot. If you don't, you're going to have some trouble. Now you can zone up, and you can be a little bit more faith. You've got instinctive safeties, and they can break on the ball in front of them. You can get away with maybe not being as good a man cover guy because you basically zone coverage. All zone coverage is man coverage in an area. But it really depends on how well you play up front because the goal defensively, ideally, is to defend the run with your front seven. So you can play split safeties to where your safeties can help out the corners in coverage and keep things in front of them. But you have to stop the run at all costs and first. So if that means you got to put a safety in the box, then you've got some limitations there. I think there's limits in their ability to cover, and sometimes they need to help out in the run game. Look, the cover ability of the linebackers, it's going to affect the middle and of the field coverage, but the deep middle, that's where the safeties need to live. And if they have to move up to help there, then it's going to affect your potential deep. But again, it all works in unison. It all works together. So if you generate good pressure, the deep ball is less likely to hurt you because they don't have as much time for those routes to develop. So how well you play in the secondary really is affected more by what is up front. And how well you play up front, how well you play in the back affects the front. But the front affects the back more than the back affects the front. But they affect one another. And I think that is important. And look, I know it's probably been a topic a lot, is just how good is this defense? I mean, this defense is to be determined. I mean, talent-wise, they're, okay. I mean, they're not upper level. They're not upper level defense. And, I would say as it relates to this team overall and the safeties and this specific question that you're talking about is they're going to have to be really good on offense and score a bunch of points and make opposing offenses one-dimensional so that they can be a little bit better and where you don't have to worry about the run as much because you're down 17 points. If they can't do that, then I think they're going to be vulnerable. Their talent level on defense does not match the upper-level teams of this league. Doesn't mean that they can't win games, but they're going to have to win them differently. And I think the key to being a good defense, the definition of a good defense for Tennessee is their ability to create turnovers and to be good situational defense. Third downs and red zone. You're going to give up plays, but can you come up with big plays at key moments like they did against Pitt? that's a good defensive effort. Was it a great stifling defense? Far from it. But they played good situational defense. Can they do that against better opponents? Look, let's look ahead. We can do that. Coaches can't. But Florida, I don't know that Florida can throw the football well enough. They're going to have to figure it out from their standpoint. So, but at some point during the year, and often you're gonna face teams that can throw it better, and can they play defensively or well enough, or you're gonna have to outscore points, have to outscore the opponent. Now, I think it's probably the latter in most cases.
Chris, question from Crazy. And if you want to ask questions of Chris Landry, the coach, on our message board, we certainly appreciate that. You're more than welcome to be a part of the show. Crazy said, is Burrell so good it's keeping Turnage off the field, or is there something else going on there?
I missed that question. You kind of went out. What's that?
Is Burrell so good that it's keeping Turnage off the field, or is there something else going on there?
Yeah, I don't know. Again, not at practice. I would not say that. I think he is good. He's played pretty well, but I would expect to see him on the field. And no, there's not. It's not, well, somebody's too good, we're going to keep him off the field. There's never, that is rarely ever the case. You find a way to get good players that are playing effectively for you on the field. My guess, and I'm going to take a gander at it, it's nothing to do with just talent. It's just assignment-wise, not real comfortable with putting him in the game in certain situations. I'm a little bit surprised, and I don't know of any injury situation that could be maybe underreported, but maybe slowing him down. No, I'm a little bit surprised that we haven't seen more of him. Maybe this week, I'm talking about Ball State, and this week you certainly want to play him there. If you don't, you wonder a little bit. I would wonder a little bit why as we go into the season. I expect to see him more going forward. I think they're going to have to. They're going to need more of those guys on the field.
Chris, Juwan Mitchell, are you hearing anything about that situation? I'm hearing he might be back for Akron. They could certainly use him. They've done a good job of keeping that under wraps.
I haven't heard anything more than, just taking it kind of day by day, week by week. My sense is that if he's ready to go, that they'll get him some reps this week. He's cleared and everything. Get him some reps. I don't know how many, but sharpen it up. A lot of times with injuries in general, people think, well, so-and-so's going to be back for this week. Well, they may be back, but they're not going to be back, meaning, how sharp, what's the layoff, you just don't know. And so I think if they can get him some reps this week, they'd like to do it, provided, he's cleared.
Chris's appearance brought to you in part by Craft Treats. Craft Treats has the incredible treats for your pet that might be suffering from some sort of illness, be it arthritis like my dog, or be it just anxiety, car ride anxiety, storm anxiety, all of that. That is Craft Treats. Craft Treats brings you Chalk Talk, which is a part of our YouTube channel. Hit that like and subscribe button. Turn your notifications on, people, so that you can get the latest. So, for instance, yesterday, John Adams of the Knoxville News Sentinel dropped. Today, it's going to be Josh Ward of the Sports Animal. And some more Chris Landry later this afternoon, as you'll have a clip of him breaking down the Vols. I know your answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it. Akron, any concern whatsoever, or should I just move on?
Well, there's not a whole lot there. This is not a really good team. I will say this for people who maybe, I'm sure you've talked about it, but for people who may have lost track or hadn't paid attention, you'll see a familiar face on the sidelines. Joe Moorhead is there. The program's not in really good shape. They didn't play poorly last week, but we're dealing with maybe an even lesser team than Ball State. So this is all about Tennessee and how well they're able to get better and execute. They're not really good at all. So now maybe I think Tennessee wraps up the MAC championship this week.
There you go. A little MACtion for the Vols. As I knew they weren't good. You said they're worse than Ball State just then.
Well, Well, I think they probably will be as the season goes on. I think they're kind of in that category. I don't know that I would want to pump up Ball State and say, yeah, they're better than anybody, but no, they're not really good at all. This team's struggling, but who knows? With a couple of games, with a game under their belt, they might perform a little bit better than Ball State, but not a lot of resistance there. They'll throw it a little bit. I think the one thing you'll see is a little bit of what Joe Moorhead likes to do with some of the RPO game, but they have a really good sense for how to play that. I think the matchup is a little bit easier for Tennessee. We'll just see how well they play.
Why do you say the matchup's easier?
Well, because they had to do a lot of RPO stuff, and Tennessee works against that every day, similar stuff in practice, whereas Ball State prepare for something a little bit different. So what they see schematically is a little bit more of what they're accustomed to playing. Talent level, not any better than Ball State. Maybe just like I said, a little worse.
I want to bounce around just for a second in some coaching rumors, as if you can, because they could in some ways affect Tennessee. Nebraska has an opening. Mark Stoops, I think, would be a great fit there because he's a coach who develops players, and I think that's what they need. I don't think Nebraska is going to suddenly become a state that produces 5-star talent year in and year out. Have you heard anything about where Nebraska might go and how that might affect the coaching carousel that will, goodness gracious, we just don't fire coaches until after the season, but now it's happening in September.
Yeah, well, cheap plug. Check out Landry Football Podcast yesterday, and it's kind of the rise and fall of Nebraska football. I think folks will like it. I kind of talk about how Nebraska rose to prominence under Bob Devaney and Tom Osborne, and what made them so good. I mean, everybody said, well, how they got that and how they built it, and then how it's regressed and why it's regressed, and what they would need to do to get maybe not back to the national prominence, but at least become maybe the program in the West. They certainly have everything to be a better version of Wisconsin and Iowa, and they're not even close to Wisconsin and Iowa in terms of consistency. I think it's a good job, but it's not the it comes with a lot of challenges. I won't do it because the podcast is about 50 minutes long, and I'm pretty proud of all the details because of my, background in scouting and knowing that program since the late 60s, early 70s. So I won't go into all those details because it's too long, but it's a tough place. You don't have unlimited walk-ons that they build their program with. You don't have, where are you going to get the players geographically? Wyoming, the Dakotas, Nebraska, you got to go far away. And they lost their identity from the Big 8 and the Big 12 when they were playing a lot of Southwest Conference and Big 12, Southwest Conference combined. They had a big stranglehold, or they had a big footprint in Texas. They lost that because now Texas kids, and their parents playing in the Big 10, so they've lost a lot of that. So where do they go? To me, I think they need to get back to being a slow build of building a good in the Big 10 West. You better match up physically with them, the bully ball that they play there, or you better be so good in what Scott was trying to do. And you can do that, but they were poor in their execution with it. I think you need to become more physical, line of scrimmage, more fundamentally sound, much better on defense, which Scott's defense at Nebraska were awful. And I think you need to be able to run it and work play action. And I think you can do RPO stuff. I think you can do a whole lot of stuff in today's game. But I think you need to start with being more physically and fundamentally sound. To me, and I've said it on the podcast, and I'll say this, if it were me, I would strongly look at, and they are strongly look. I think their number one candidate, and I think it should be, is Matt Campbell of Iowa State. I don't know if Matt's going to take it or if he's going to use it for leverage. I think he might be willing to consider it since the Big 12 is not going to be the same as, Oklahoma and Texas goes out, and you got a lot of resources. Look, Nebraska's got a lot of money, got Big 10 money. So I would look hard there. I think Chris Kleiman at Kansas State is phenomenal. I think he did a great job at North Dakota State, and he fits right in the mold of what they would do. not to pick against the Kansas schools, and I'm trying to poach their coaches, but Lance Leipold is outstanding. The job he did at Buffalo, the job that he did at Wisconsin Whitewater, the job that he's doing at Kansas quietly. I mean, they went and they beat West Virginia. They are so fundamentally sound. They're really good. So those are three guys that I think would be really good fits. There's some others. That's where I would start. And if you Trev Alberts in that administration, I've talked to a couple of people there. I mean, I think you gotta convince one of those guys. I think any of those three would be great. Not that there wouldn't be others, but to me, that's where I would go. I don't think Mark Stoops would have any interest in the job personally. I don't think that's what he would. I don't think he'd consider that. And he's certainly an outstanding coach who's done a great job. I think Mark's idea is that he's at Kentucky, and that if he's going to leave, he's going to leave for what is a more modern day elite program. Nebraska is historically elite, but I think, look, he turned down Florida State. And, I think that, everyone will say he's doing a good job, and maybe he's got a little tired of Calipari and his smart aleck ways, and maybe he'll, but he's not going to be stupid and leave just to leave. I mean, I think he'd leave for a really good elite job. I mean, and what would that be? And I'm not saying that he would, but a Notre Dame, a Michigan. I mean, he could do better than Nebraska, and I think a lot of Nebraska, if that makes sense. So that's why I don't think that's a real match.
So what kind of job would Mark Stoops leave for?
Well, that's what I said. Notre Dame, a Michigan, Ohio State. I don't think he'd want to go through. He wouldn't go through he wouldn't go through the politics at Auburn. But he could get one of those elite jobs. He absolutely could. I mean, let me just tell you this. I told you this. I think the other day he was on the long list at LSU, not on the short list. He would have left for LSU. Yeah. One of those elite jobs. Now he's also got Midwest ties. So, I mean, if Ohio State came open, I don't know that he'd leave to go to Iowa, but that's his alma mater. He probably, I think, feels like he could do better. I think he'd look at that. I think, if you look at what you'd consider top 10 jobs in the country, just fill in the blank. If they ever come open, Ohio State, I don't know if Michigan would move there, but Notre Dame, I think that's what he's looking for. I think Nebraska is really good, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he would consider it. My sense in knowing Mark, I think he'd probably hold on. I don't think he's looking to leave. I think he would leave for the right job, and I don't think Nebraska is the right fit for him. As good a job as it is, I think he's got higher expectations.
So Tennessee plays LSU, and of course they had that season opener against Florida State that was a fiasco, and you had the Butte issue, and on and on and on, and they should have won that game. Do you think that teams pulled together? Because the first year adjusting from Ned Orgeron to Brian Kelly is going to be a major adjustment for a roster, and I could see Brian Kelly having success at LSU. I could also see him. I think Nick Saban was 7-6 in his first year in Alabama, or is that right?
Well, he lost to ULM at Alabama. He lost to UAB first year at LSU. So, yeah, I know where you're going with it. Yeah, I know where you're going with it.
I could see him instituting culture and it be a long-term smart play, but it may not take effect in 2022, which would help the Vols when they go to Baton Rouge.
Yeah, no, I think Tennessee, I've said it before, I think they're getting both Florida and LSU at the right time. I think Florida and LSU are going to be much better down the road and a lot tougher for Tennessee to handle than this year. So with that said, we'll see what Tennessee can do this year. Yeah, I agree. And You got to go to Baton Rouge, and no question. But yeah, that you nailed it. I mean, it's the other thing I would say that maybe people don't understand is that this LSU team has lost a lot of talent. Now they're still good, but they're not LSU good. I mean, their offensive line's not good. Right now, they don't have a difference maker at running back. I mean, I think that Brian's going to do a good job with Jaden Daniels, but I don't know. I mean, but they've got some. Nussmeier's got some ability. Walker Howard is the quarterback of the future, the elite true freshman. So they got some issues there defensively. They're good. They've got better talent on that side of the ball, but they've had a couple of injuries early, and so no, this is a transition year. You're absolutely correct. It doesn't mean that they can't beat Tennessee. No, I think they can, but I think this is Tennessee's getting them, quote unquote, at the right time, just as they are with Florida. I think Florida's program is headed in the right direction. I think LSU is, but you're right, headed in the right direction. But like the path is really long, like not this year type.
Right. I told people yesterday on the show, you do whatever you can to go to Baton Rouge if you haven't been to a game at Tiger Stadium, because it is probably one of my 3 favorites. I love the Swamp. I do love Neyland. Auburn, to me, was always a little underrated. When I showed up there for the first time, I was like, holy Hannah. I thought this was supposed to be the, little kid brother of the other school. And the environment there was unbelievable. There is BYU, where they had 2 female fans topless over the weekend. I don't know if you heard that standing around. Thoughts?
Well, yeah, and I mean, I could say that both of them. I could say something really off color, like they were both married to the same guy. But
or they were a couple of cougars on the prowl.
Could be. Well, there you go. But thank you. No, that was quite interesting there. And by the way, what a game that was. I don't know how many folks stayed up late to watch it. I did, against Baylor, but that was a real intriguing matchup. I thought Baylor really kind of let one get away, but thought they'd win that game. But BYU, that's a real. I've been there. They've got an unbelievable. By the way, I mean, you're in the TV business. You should know this. The television studio at BYU, the university, is like better than anything CBS, NBC, and ABC can put together. It is like because they do all those, stuff. It's unbelievable.
Chris, you don't tell me that, because my son wants to study film. So we've toured Southern Cal, and we're about to tour NYU. I don't need to add another high-dollar school to the list. And
I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's like the, this is like the kind of the Mormon, but they've got this unbelievable thing. They don't do a whole lot with sports on it, but you can catch the BYU channel on DirecTV. I other than maybe catching a few sports here or there, it's not my go-to. But no, yeah. So I don't know. I don't know. It's yeah, those are really good. I tell you one thing about Auburn. What was the most intriguing thing about Auburn was back in the day when Coach Dowd was coaching against them. They had the biggest crown on the field that you ever could see. It was when you stand on the sidelines. To give you an idea, you could see only like the shoulder up from Pat Dye. So literally, you're standing.
Let me interrupt for those that don't understand. The crown, there is a crown on the field, so it drains. If you haven't been on a football field, the middle of the field slightly higher, supposed to be, but Chris is saying it was way higher,
really high. And back in the day when they didn't monitor it quite as much for the draining purpose, it wasn't for the drain because they didn't need that much drain. It was to help the running game, because you get those backs. It would be like running down a hill. It would kind of be like what Oklahoma used to do in Owen Field. And because they get that open, and it would be like running down the hill, and good luck trying to come uphill and tackle them. So, but Jordan Hare is great. And, there's a lot of great places. But Tiger Stadium is a bucket list game if you're a college fan. Folks will feed you, and then, Tiger bait at you. And, SEC crowds are really. I would say go to the Horseshoe, go to the Big House, go to a night game in a whiteout in Happy Valley. There's a lot of good places around the country to go and see. We just talked about Nebraska. No fans are more loyal and polite to opposing folks than Nebraska fans. Sellout since the last time they didn't have a sellout at Nebraska, John F. Kennedy wasn't even president yet.
I did make a mistake there. Joe pointed out that it was Utah where they were topless when the security guard said, "Hey, Utes, put your shirt on." So that's all I got. Now, a couple of questions on Tennessee. Do you like Tyler Barron lined up interior defensive line? You think Tim Banks pulls that out again? Thoughts?
I think what I like about it is I think putting him in a 3 technique is very effective. Moving him around is effective. But I don't know that I like him there full time. No, I like when I get good matchup advantages. I want him. I think he can close the edge pretty well. And putting him inside full time limits the ability to do that. But the first step quickness against the right front, right blocking scheme is very effective. Moving them around is the optimum here. You want to be able to move them around in 3-5 technique, line them out even wider. That's what I would do with them. The moving around part is the secret sauce there.
Tennessee recruiting, what would it be if the Vols beat Florida and LSU in the same season? Remind you that Pedigo Chattanooga is a great place to hop on a bike and tour around town with some pedal assist. You won't be exhausted. You'll cover the whole town. You won't have to worry about parking. You'll love it. They're family owned, locally owned, and they are awesome. Pedigo of Chattanooga. So, Chris, I want to ask you about Tennessee football recruiting. How would that be affected? I know one game doesn't matter, but if it were LSU and Florida, what kind of an impact would that have? We'll ask Chris that. Back in 2 minutes.
It's Gary Viles here, Viles Automotive on Callahan Drive. I've been selling cars here in East Tennessee for 27 years. In that time, I've come to realize it's not about the car. It's about you, the customer. So I'm here to take care of you just like family. Good credit, bad credit, you name it, we can get you taken care of. If we don't have it, we can find it for you. We go across the country to get any vehicle that you want. And here at Viles Automotive, we don't believe in fake numbers. We just give you great deals. And as always, we want, we need, and we appreciate your business.
Do you want to own the more that owns every job? Then get to Vassy Lawn and Garden in Cleveland and get you a Toro. I'm David Vassy, here to talk to you about Toro. With a Toro Zero Turn, you'll get more out of every minute and you'll reach the finish line faster. At Vassy's, we like to say, no matter if you're mowing 3 acres a week or 11 lawns a day, homeowners and business owners alike find confidence in equipment they can trust from top to bottom.
Vassy Lawn and Garden, Highway 60 North in Cleveland.
Man alive, it's worth the drive.
This is Steve Rain. I own the Midnight Oil and Michelin Tire Direct service station here in Ottawa. It's not a fancy place, never has been, but it's a clean place with clean restrooms and good folks who work here. We sell gas and fix cars, nothing glamorous, but we love what we do, and we're going to keep doing it for a long time to come. There's not many real service stations left, and that's a shame. We're the guys just like the guys back in your hometown. We'll fix your tire, change your oil, and put a new set of Michelins on your car. If you want a Twinkie, you'll just have to keep on going. Thanks for the business.
Hi, Mike Davis here with City Heating and Air, reminding you to always dare to compare. Our team provides quality local heating and air service, installation, and maintenance across East Tennessee. We use only the best equipment like American Standard heating and air conditioning for your residential, new construction, or commercial needs. Honesty, dependability, and customer satisfaction have been the cornerstones of our business since 1961. City Heat and Air.
Dare to compare.
All right, here we go. Today's tough question. Chris Landry is sitting in for Amanda LaFrada. And Chris might have to talk a lot because, Chris, you can tell I'm starting to lose my voice. Here we go. Let's go. It's been a long, it's been one of those. So let's get to today's tough question, and we'll have Chris take part in that. And it's kind of from a fan's perspective, Chris. So it might not be right up your wheelhouse, but we'll get your thoughts. Today's tough question. Excuse me. Maybe a second puberty. Is that what happens, Chris?
I don't know about that.
You're a little bit older than me. Chris's appearance brought to you in part by Owl's Nest Barbecue, and Owl's Nest Barbecue has everything you need right there in Noodle Wall for your barbecuing. They've got the fantastic sauces, the fantastic rubs, everything you could possibly need in the Green Mountain Grills. Today's tough question with Chris Landry is now.
We do our research. Have you done your research?
We're working like heck.
Today's tough question. What's the real debate?
You sipping my Soupe Guadalupe?
Exclusively on Off the Hook Sports with Dave Hooker and Amanda LaFrada.
You drinking my Kimosabi?
Oh my God.
Hey, Chris, I got a Hooker shirt for you. If you can tell me the 3 coaches, Tennessee coaches that were on that element.
Oh man!
Let's just.
If I'd have known that, I would have listened closer. I didn't hear it too well. I was laughing at the other guys with the
here we go
and all that. All right, let me listen again.
Okay, then I'm just going to stop it. I'm going to stop it and I'm going to restart it. And you tell me if you can name all 3 of the Tennessee coaches. Hold your hand up for those that are watching and give me a 1, 2, 3 when you know them. Okay. There are 3 Tennessee coaches in this element. So you tell me who they are, and Chris Landry, you will win a T-shirt. Here we go.
We do our research. Have you done your research?
We're working like heck.
Today's tough question. What's the real debate?
You sipping my Soupe Guadalupe?
Exclusively on Off the Hook Sports with Dave Hooker and Amanda LaFrada.
You drinking my sake Kimosabi?
Oh my God.
All right, did you get any of them?
Yeah, I know Phil. I got Phil Fulmer. I didn't recognize the guy right before Phil though, and the others I don't recognize the voice.
It was
Phil Fulmer is pretty distinctive. It's 3-4 seconds. I can name that tune in like 2 notes.
They need to bring that back. All right, so it was Derek Dooley at the end. At the beginning, it was Butch Jones. And how much better is Tennessee off than with those 2 bozos? No offense.
I didn't catch. I didn't hear that too good. Yeah, well, it makes sense. Yeah, would be those 2. Yeah, Philip was the only one I caught there.
All right, so today's tough question, as we will ask that, and let me pull that up right now. Okay, so Chris is watching the game and not the scoreboard on Saturday. I'll go ahead and tell you, and he's going to give you some things that you want to see. So, Chris, I know where you're going to go in here, but I'm going to let you explain why. So today's tough question is, what do you want to see most this weekend when the Vols play the Zips? And that is 70 points, Hooker throws 6 touchdowns, 0 mistakes, or defensive dominance. What would you say, and what do you think the fans have said?
Well, defensive dominance, the mistakes would be number 1. You've got to clean up things there because those things can be habit forming. So you want to create good habits. So that's the most important thing, I'd look for. Akron's not going to score a lot of points because they're not good enough to. And Tennessee's going to score. They probably score. I mean, I'd be surprised if they didn't score mid-50s or higher. And I think it's a 55, 60 point. So I would imagine, I don't know what the fans would have. Fans probably want a 70 points, and shut out on defense. I don't know.
No, actually, defensive 0 mistakes was number 1, and I think when defensive dominance was number 2. I think when you come off a game in which you have a punt blocked and you fumble a punt return, those are like glaring mistakes that I think a lot of everybody sees, whereas you might see a misstep here and a misstep there. You might see Hendon Hooker make a bad read. I think the mistakes part still kind of grind Tennessee's fans' gears a little bit. Now, the question that was asked earlier that I teased and I promised that I would get to, so I'm going to do that right now. Daniel asking if Tennessee takes down Florida and LSU this season, does that have a longer-term effect on recruiting? I've said we need to take them and Kentucky and make it known that we're at least number 2 in the East. I covered recruiting for a lot of years. I thought way too much was put into the impact that one game would have on a young man's decision. However, with that being said, Chris, if Tennessee were to beat Florida and LSU, they would look like the third team in the SEC. So I would make the argument, and I want to write a column based off Daniel's post later today. I would make the argument, yes, if they beat both of those teams, that would have an impact on recruiting. Does it?
Yeah, it does. I mean, look, I think that, to be honest with you, the future of Tennessee's programming, they may be who's the third best team in the SEC this year is different than who the third best program is, because that's more about a sustain. So I think beating Florida, beating LSU, beating Kentucky certainly would help their recruiting it better. But unless you start recruiting top 5 nationally at Tennessee, it's not going to be sustained. You know, if Florida recruits top 5 talent and you don't, then, I mean, Florida is going to have the better program in future years. Georgia definitely does, and that's not changing. Alabama's not changing. Now they're on the other side, and you got to play them. LSU will recruit likely better. You know, so look, and so I think that the future of the program and who can have a better recruiting class this year may be short-term goals, but I do think that winning and making a statement and kind of, because here's the thing, what's the alternative? You don't finish second in the East and you finish behind Kentucky, or you finish behind Florida if you beat them. You don't want that. I mean, you don't want to finish behind Florida, and Florida's in a transition year. You know what I'm saying? So I think I think it's not essential, but I think it's pretty much almost essential that Tennessee finishes really, really high to help. But I also think it's going to be up to how they want to build this program at Tennessee and how they look at it. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Are you going to build a program that's going to be elite defensive talent like the elite teams in this conference do? Or are you going to be, the Lincoln Riley of the SEC, where you're going to have fun offenses, but you're never going to be elite because you don't play good defenses, because your offenses are so up-tempo and you don't recruit or practice and play defensively. That is just nothing more than we got to try to create turnovers, but we can't get stops. There's a low ceiling if you do that. Nationally, right now, it works great because everybody's excited. They're winning at Tennessee and they're going to finish. That's what people look at. But if you're asking me if this is a next step towards Tennessee being, the second best program in the East, I have to see them adjust their style and become better recruiting and being in that top 5 level. Because if you don't do that, then you're just going to be a good program that goes to good bowl games. And I think there's going to be a natural belief that incrementally Tennessee, well, look, he's only been there a while. He's going to be better and better and better and get to that next step. It is pretty easy, relatively speaking, to go from a bad program to look pretty good. That's not that difficult. What's really tough is to go from where Tennessee is now to, boy, can we get to the point where we're contending for the SEC title? That's a big jump. That's a much bigger jump. It's like in the NFL, it's easy to go from a 2-win team to a 7-win team. But boy, is it tough to go from 7 to 9. That is really tough.
Yeah.
And I think Tennessee's gone from a program that was down, directionless, just awful, and they're competitive and they're fun. But are they headed towards greatness? I don't see that. But there's always that potential there. It just depends on how they go about building it. If Josh builds it like, Lincoln Riley's done, and it's like right now, Lincoln Riley. Lee, is that offense is outstanding at USC, and they're going to win there. Their defense is awful. If they don't recruit better on defense, then they'll be, good enough to win the Pac-12. But when they get to the Big Ten, I don't know. I mean, they're they were good enough to win in the Big 12, but they weren't good enough to compete beyond that. That's the ceiling, I think, for Tennessee under Josh Heupel. But the difference is in the SEC, that's going to keep you, winning however many games, and going to bowl games, but it won't get you SEC titles.
You've said before that this looks like an 8-win team, but could easily win 9 with the schedule. So if I said you have to bet your mortgage payment on Tennessee this season wins 10, or let's say 9 or 7, which would you bet your mortgage payment on?
Well, here's what I felt. I felt like winning the first 3 was probable. Beating UT Martin, I don't like Missouri or South Carolina or Vanderbilt. I mean, this is a very easy schedule that Tennessee has. So to me, there was 3, 4, 7 wins. I mean, 7 wins right off the top. And don't think they're going to beat Alabama. Don't think they're going to beat Georgia. Those are 2 games that will lose. And what happened against Alabama and Texas is not, I don't see that happen. It could, but I don't see it happen. So the variables, to your point, is the Florida and LSU games, which are winnable, maybe more winnable this year than maybe in future years. That gets you to the 9 games right there. Okay, so, but you got to win both. And I think if you do that and you beat Missouri, South Carolina, and Vanderbilt, which you should, and of course UT Martin, that gives you your 9 games. So you gotta beat Kentucky. If you beat Florida and LSU, you got to beat Kentucky to get to 10. And that's doable. I mean, I know historically they've done it, and we're going to see what type of shape Kentucky is and Tennessee is by the time they play. So that's the variable. To me, that's the thing. They're an 8-win team with maybe a 9, potentially a 10-win schedule, because they really don't have much resistance at Missouri, South Carolina, and Vanderbilt. I don't care what anybody says. They're not good teams. They lose to one of those teams, shame on them. Just they're not that's really playing beneath you. So they're an 8-win team with a 9 or a 10-win schedule. And I think their chances are pretty good against LSU and Florida. Doesn't make them Tennessee any better than I think they are. I just think that the teams that they're getting them at the right times, and I think they're vulnerable, and I think Tennessee can beat them. So I think 9 is really probable because of their schedule, and 10 is really possible. I don't think any more of that is realistic at all. And I think there's possibility, depending on whether they take care of business and maybe they drop a game out on LSU or against Florida, then that's where you go back to the 8 wins. But I think it's an 8-win type of team in a normal, good SEC schedule, but that is not what they have this year. They have an easier schedule. So I think they're a 9-win team. They could win 9 or could win 10, even though I see them an 8. I know people say, well, what are you talking? Yeah, because I look at how good a team is, and it's like in the NFL. You're in the AFC West. I mean, you're a better team. Your record may not be as good as, in the AFC South, because it's you got weaker opponents. I mean, you got you play 2 games. Well, again, you're playing Missouri, South Carolina, Vanderbilt. They're not very good. You play UT Martin, they're not very good. You play Ball State and Pitt, Ball State and Akron, not very good. Pitt, I think this year wasn't as good. So, I mean, those are 6 games that are, Ball State, Akron, UT Martin, Missouri. Those are 6 games. You start with 6 wins.
Yep.
So, I think there's definitely a good chance that they win 9 or 10. And that's all that the public and the media is going to look at. Wow, look at the program 9 or 10. That's where the expectations go. Well, wait, now we win 9 this year. Wait, we're going to win 10 or 11. sounds like, the Kentucky fans. Kentucky is a really good team. Now the expectation, because they beat Florida, is that, well, now when are we going to beat Georgia? Not going to beat Georgia. It's just, but Kentucky's in a position too to beat Missouri, to beat South Carolina, to beat Vanderbilt. They're going to rack up some wins. Tennessee's in the same situation. They're different than Kentucky, built completely different, but they both have the advantage of being in an East that I think is pretty soft at the middle and the bottom. I think Tennessee and Kentucky are good. I think Florida is going to be challenged at times, but they're good. That's going to be a good win if Tennessee beats Florida. It's going to be a good win if they beat Tennessee, if they beat Kentucky. It's expected in my mind that they should beat Missouri, South Carolina, and Vanderbilt. They're just better than those teams. They're going to have to play poorly. I don't think those teams can beat Tennessee. Tennessee would have to lose it. Just like I don't think Tennessee can beat Georgia or Alabama. Those teams would have to lose it. That's how I look at things, and how that reconciles with what the exact record's going to be. It's all relative.
Chris Landry, go ahead and say it because I forget it. What should they do about the buttons on their screen, Chris?
Hey, go ahead, subscribe and like. You absolutely want to do that. Subscribe and like. Did I forget anything? It is subscribe and like, correct?
That's it. I just forget it all the time, so I need some help. Daniel said, "Thank you, Chris. Amazing thoughts," and I agree. Love Chris to death, and in a totally football sort of way. The mattress place is right outside.
I appreciate that too.
Right
out. Wait, more than you think.
Right outside of Knoxville. It's like 2 miles from downtown. And share. I didn't even mention that. Yes, if you can share, that would be fantastic. So like, subscribe, and share. Thank you, Orange Blood. I'm working my way through this coming out of traditional radio, but I do love it. And I do love the interaction with you guys. So the mattress place is 22 years on Chapman Highway. 22 years. Marine Corps veteran owned. Check this out. A+ on the Better Business Bureau. Over 225 5-star reviews. If you go buy a mattress anywhere else, you're just crazy and you're getting fleeced. I will tell you that. Not like a fleece pillow, but a mattress. Now, 30 to 70% off each and every day at the mattress place. So we talked a lot about Hendon Hooker this day in sports history. We're going to talk passers, which is somewhat similar to this day in sports history.
This day in sports history, putting things in perspective, exclusively on Off the Hook Sports with Dave Hooker.
You're so old. When you were a kid, rainbows were black and white.
And Amanda LaFrada.
New kids on the block just called. They wanted you as a backup dancer.
Now, this day in sports history, Chris. Dan Marino was born on this day. Check out the year here. I had the year in front of me.
Would have been 82 drafts, so he'd have been into 80. He would, let's see, I'm going to guess.
You guess while I look it up, because
I don't know. Let's see here.
I just fumbled the ball here.
20, 60.
No.
64?
61.
61. Yeah, let's say 60. Yeah, there you go. 82 drafts that have put him at about 20. I could have been about 20, 21, 22. I don't know. No, I would put him about 22. So that makes sense. 61. Yeah, I was thinking that wrong.
Well, that was an okay draft. The best pure passer you've ever seen is, give me your top three.
He'd be in that group. I mean, boy, he could throw it, man. Could he do it? Joe Namath.
Good one.
Really, really pure. Those two.
If I can interrupt for a second, the amazing part about, if you see Joe Namath highlights, you don't see a lot of big arms back in the 60s. Was Terry Bradshaw would be one. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's before my time. But you see Joe Namath throw the ball, and it's just like, holy gravy. I don't know if that ball's ever going to come down. I mean, his arm strength, especially for that era before all the training and all that stuff, it was beautiful to watch.
It was. Believe it or not, with all those knee injuries, people forget that his setup, his drop back was the best ever. I mean, he set up as quickly and released the football. And you mentioned he throws some missiles, and he was just, the Don Maynard and that crew was just phenomenal. Marino was not as fluid and his drop back wasn't as good, but man, his release was super quick.
Oof.
He'd get it from through the ear, and it just was unbelievable. Those two stand out. There were some other good ones. You go back, Sammy Ball was, and I'm going to go old school on you, but Sammy Ball on the TCU tape, and then obviously the Redskins tape. Man, he was such a natural. And by the way, one of the greatest punters too.
Yeah.
The two-way. I mean, but what a natural thrower of the ball back when it, and this was when the passing game wasn't it. But those are some really good ones. I had one in Warren Moon was really great. There's just a whole bunch of them. But I would say that Marino and Namath would kind of stand above in terms of just pure, passers. There's some good ones in today's game now that's fun to watch. But the way they do it now is a little bit different. They're off-platform throws. Back then, the pure setup, drop-back guys, now they do things that just athletically are mind-boggling.
We have come so far. I can still remember years ago, Warren Moon, because he was one of my favorite players to watch. Haywood Jeffries and all those guys, and I can't remember the names like I used to, but
Ernest Gibbons.
And so we've come so far. I can remember some really ignorant fans saying the thing I don't like about Warren Moon is he just runs all the time. No, you're just saying that because he happens to be African American.
Yeah, he never ran. Warren never ran, and he couldn't run. He didn't run much. Look, he played in Canada with Edmonton, and what he did do is he rolled the pocket better in that wide open game, but he didn't run.
Oh.
He ran a little bit at University of Washington. He was a great player at the University of Washington, and today he literally had to go to Canada to prove himself. It just tell you how things have changed. But
Condridge Holloway had it.
Condridge Holloway was really, but Warren was a pure passer. I mean, when he ran, it was something he had to do, but he wasn't a runner. No, that's exactly right. That's the stereotype. I'm going to throw something because they heard somebody say it type thing, and it doesn't make any sense. That's one of the things that I laugh at. Somebody I got asked this week, like somebody was making a comment, I guess, I don't know, on one of the networks about Kentucky being soft and they were going to get blown out by Florida. And I'm like, okay, you could make a case of Kentucky losing. Kentucky under Mark Stoops and soft. You obviously haven't watched it because the last thing that Kentucky is soft. They're physical. They're maybe not explosive enough and they got limitations, but they're like the opposite of soft. I mean, it's just some of the things that people come up with at times about players. It's like, that's not anything like what they are.
This day in sports history brought to you by Zool Beer Company. Zool Beer Company, the official craft beer of Off the Hook Sports, downtown Knoxville. It is delicious. Certainly check it out. And Chris, one other note, this day in sports history, and that is, I don't know if you're an NBA guy. Did you watch the Winning Time about the Lakers?
I did.
Okay.
Yes.
It was very loosely based on facts. But one of the things I learned is the ongoing relationship between Cookie and Magic and how, he, let's just say, wasn't incredibly faithful. And so they got married on this day back in, I believe it was 1981. And
no, it would be 91, I would think.
Because, 91.
Because he was.
I'm sorry, 91.
In 79, they won the title. He took a little while before him to settle down and marry his high school and college sweetheart was Cookie. But with Magic Johnson, talking about one of the all-time greats, and Judd Heathfield's team there. I got to know Jerry West pretty well. And so I don't think he was really happy with how he was portrayed in that series because he came across as this that's not the Jerry West I know. I have no idea why they portrayed him that way. He was competitive, but Jerry was one of the greats himself. I remember Jerry and Gil Goodrich and those and Elgin Baylor and Wilt Chamberlain on those Laker teams. But yeah, I remember Magic obviously going back into the college. I remember when Magic was recruited. That there was a lot of discussion because Mark Aguirre and Isaiah Thomas were really close growing up. Now, Mark Aguirre and Isaiah Thomas were from Chicago, so they were like really close. But Magic, I guess through some of it wasn't AAUs back then, but they talked a lot about going to the same college. Could you imagine that?
It'd be like the Fab Five before the Fab Five.
Now, I will say this, that Isaiah Thomas came very close to going to DePaul. If he didn't go to Indiana, he would have gone to DePaul, and he would have been he'd have been on those great Bray Meyer DePaul teams with would have been Isaiah, Mark Aguirre, Catchings, Terry Catchings.
Yeah.
Those teams kind of really foundered in the NCAA tournament. But could you imagine throwing in Isaiah Thomas on those DePaul teams that were like number one seeds every year anyway? Anyway, it's a great little basketball nugget.
This guy, Chris, knows basketball as well. Chris, can you confirm or deny that part of Magic's vows he would only have 3 concurrent girlfriends at a time?
All I will say is this.
No doubt.
All I will say, I'll leave it this. They said in the old forum.
I don't know that I want to hear this story.
No, it's going to be PG. There was so after the game, they'd have like cold tubs and hot tubs that guys would get their therapy. And because it was an older place, let's just say that they were getting more than
okay. All right.
More than ice baths in there. There was a lot of things going on.
I got it.
Terry West told me this, and it was unbelievable. It was like what you hear about the old Playboy Playmate house. That was that. So that's enough there.
We're cutting.
I won't be asked to come back on this show anymore.
No. That's fantastic stuff. Again, we appreciate it if you like, subscribe, and share. We want to be a part of your day. He's Chris Landry. I'm Dave Hooker. Have a fantastic day, everyone. This is a production